Alright, so in this video, I want to show you how to export the textures of this model here. So it's really easy. We're going to go to File, Export Textures. Now there's a few things we have to set up. It can be kind of confusing. So if you go to this output template, there's a bunch of different ones here. Now the one you'll commonly use is PBR Metallic Roughness. If you're using Unity, there's also some pre-made options for like the HD render pipeline and also the universal render pipeline. But for this video, I'm going to do the PBR Metallic Roughness. Now, we actually have to customize this a bit because it doesn't include ambient occlusion. So if I go to Output Templates and select the, PBR Metallic Roughness, you're going to see this actually doesn't have an AO channel in here. So I've actually made a few copies that do have an AO. I'm going to show you how to set that up. So let me actually just remove these so we can do it from scratch. So what you're going to do is select PBR Metallic Roughness and duplicate it, okay? Then you're going to have a copy. You can just double click on it and rename it to like AO so you know that it includes that. And I'm going to remove the emissive channel because I don't actually have any emissive type of things going on the textures, right? So I'm going to remove that, and this time I want to add in an AO, so basically for the shadows. So we do that by going here to Gray Channel and just click on that. And what I usually do is I just press Control A and then Control C to copy. And then I paste it in here and I just rename this to AO, like that. And then what we have to do is we have to actually grab one of these input maps here, drag it in. We're going to go to Gray Channel, and that's all you have to do. Now I want to quickly tell you what all this means right here. This $mesh means it will be exported with the mesh name coming first. The $texture set means that after that it's going to have the name of the texture set. In this case, it's the UVs.001 material. So if you wanted to, you can come in here and rename this. You could just call it gun, whatever you want to name it, doesn't matter. And we're just going to go back in here to this PBR Metallic Roughness AO. So basically what would happen when we export this is it would say the name of the mesh, so gun, the name of the texture set, which is gun again, and then it would just have like the name of the map. In this case, it would be normal or metallic or roughness or whatever. Now I don't need all this extra information. It's just too much to kind of read. So usually what I do is I simply just remove one of these. I'm not too worried about the name of the texture set here, so what I'm going to actually do is just remove the portion that says texture set for all of these. It's just going to kind of make the name of these maps a bit more condensed. You don't have to do this, it really doesn't matter at all. I just kind of like having shorter names whenever I export my textures. So I'm just going to do this to all of these here. We'll remove this one for height and then also remove for the AO. Awesome. So that's it. It's just going to export with some easier abbreviations here. So now what we need to do is go back to settings, select that PBR Metallic Roughness AO that we created, and you can do PNGs, fine. 16 bits and 8 bits in dithering. I usually do like 8 bits in dithering, which basically removes, it kind of adds like a layer of noise to kind of remove any baking artifacts. You can look up YouTube videos on what that does. 8 bits in dithering is pretty good. Really depends on your needs. Size, we're going to do 4K. Maybe you're doing 2K, so whatever you want, we'll do 4K. And I'm just going to leave the padding alone, that's fine. And for the output directory, just choose a folder. So I'll just make a new folder and I'll call this Substance Maps. Click on Export and just kind of wait for it to do its thing. It should be pretty quick. And here it is. So everything in here should be exported now. So you're going to see the name is really simple. It's gun low AO, gun low base color, and so on. So you can kind of load these in and just see how they look. You have your normal map, pretty good. You have your roughness map. Height map, we're not going to be using that. I'm just going to actually delete that out. And base color and our metallic. So I'm going to show you how to set this up in Blender so you can render it out. Alright, so I think we left off in this Blender scene last when we were doing that ID map stuff. I'm just going to change this back to material. Okay, cool. So this is super easy to do. Make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on turned on. Very important because it's just going to kind of expedite this whole process. So I'm just going to drag out a new panel here. Going to go to Shader Editor. I'm going to delete out this old image texture, which is basically just our, set of checkers here. And we're going to replace this with all the other maps that we just exported. So our base color, metallic, roughness, all that cool stuff. The way we do this is by selecting this and press Control-Shift-T. And that won't work unless Node Wrangler is turned on. So Control-Shift-T, you can just navigate to wherever you exported it, Substance Maps, and you can just load all these in. So select here, shift-click down to here, and click on Principled Texture Setup. Now the only issue with this is it doesn't load in ambient occlusion by default. That's something Node Wrangler doesn't do, unfortunately. So we actually have to add that in manually. It's very easy. I'm just going to press G and then Y to move that one up a bit, and then Shift D to duplicate it. We'll press Y again to move it down, like that. Then we're just going to click on the folder icon and load in that AO manually. So let's quickly hop into material mode and just see how it looks. Looks pretty good. We could also load in maybe a different HDRI. You could use like a studio or something, just kind of see what works for you. Abandoned slipway looks okay. I kind of want more of like a studio type of vibe. Definitely not this. Let's rotate it a bit and kind of see how that looks. Yeah, I'm just going to use a simple one for right now. This one's kind of cool. This like warehouse type of vibe. Anyways, doesn't matter too much. I'm only concerned with the lighting for when we're rendering. I just want a decent preview for right now, and it looks pretty good. Alright, so you're going to notice that everything's connected up, but the ambient occlusion we still have to connect up. So we do this by mixing it with the base color. So what we do is we press Shift A, Color, Mix RGB. You can just drop it in here. And we want to set this to multiply. What that's going to do is ignore the white values and keep the black values, because ambient occlusion, we only care about the black values for the shadows. So what we can do is connect this up to here. We might actually have to swap these. Maybe not. Let's keep it here. And check this out. As I decrease and increase the factor, you can kind of see the shadows getting added in to the areas where you would naturally see them. I don't recommend going to 1, and obviously I don't recommend going to 0 because then you wouldn't have any effect. 0.5 is perfect. It's a nice balance between the two. So this is without ambient occlusion, and this is with ambient occlusion, just a little bit nicer with the shadows. You could always go into rendered mode and load in your favorite HDRI. So you would just go in here, and then you would basically just click on this button, go to environment texture, and then you could just load in, whatever HDRIs you have. You can download HDRIs on polyhaven.com. There's going to be a separate video that Ryu makes showing you how to set up HDRIs and all that cool stuff for rendering for your portfolio. So you can just kind of try different lighting setups. There's no right or wrong. Rendering and lighting comes with a lot of practice and just trial and error. So, I could just kind of load in some of these different ones, see how they look, maybe even pop into cycles instead of Eevee. We're going to have a pretty cool result here. So yeah, that's about it. That's how you load it into Blender. Incredibly easy, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can get kind of tricky. So I hope this video helped. Alright, so we're back here in Blender. I want to show you how to make an ID map. ID maps are very powerful, and you'll see why soon. But basically what you can do is you can assign different colors to different areas of your mesh. So that way when you're in SubstancePainter, you can add materials based off of those colors. So maybe like this scope here is red, and maybe this is like purple. What you could do is select and add the material to like the purple area, for example, or to the red area. It makes life so much more simple when you're texturing. So you'll kind of see how it all works in a second, but it's very easy to do. What we need to do is we need to go over to Vertex Paint right here. Now, Vertex Paint is basically, there's a lot of settings in here you're not going to use, but the way I do it is I go to object mode, and I first just select like a certain piece here. We can go into edit mode, so tab, into maybe vertex mode. And what we can do is just select areas that we know are going to have one single material. So I know, for example, this is going to have one material, and this is, I'm pressing the L key, by the way. I know this is going to have the same material. This one, basically all these right here are going to have the same material. So for all the pieces I know are going to have a unique material, I'm going to give that one color. So all these right here, I just want to give one simple color. I think I got everything. Also press the L key right there for those two. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Vertex Paint again, tick on this button. This will basically sample from the areas we had selected. Just choose a color like green, and then press Shift K, and that's just going to make everything green. Really easy. And then what we could do is go back into edit mode again, and maybe we could, I don't know, let's invert the selection with Control I, and maybe these might have a different material. I don't know. Let me press, actually no, this is cool. I think I want all those selected. I don't know why this is selected right here. That's weird. Okay, then what I could do is I could go to Vertex Paint again, maybe make this one like a cyan. You can make the color whatever you want, by the way, just make sure it's different. And if I go back into Vertex Paint and turn this off, you can kind of see what's happening here. So I'm going to do the same thing for the scope. So let me once again pull this picture in. So notice how some of the scope's going to have a metal, some of it's going to have more of a polymer. So that's kind of the idea I want here. So what I could do is tab into edit mode for this one, or vertex mode specifically. And maybe this one could have a unique material. Same for this entire scope right here. I'll just press the L key. Pretty easy. Maybe this whole portion too. Maybe these pieces here on the top. Maybe these pieces here on the side. Easy enough. Maybe, what else? I think that's it. Then we can just go back into Vertex Paint, choose a different color, tick on this button, and then press Shift K. And then we can just hop back into edit mode, and maybe this time we could, I don't know, invert the selection with Control I. And this one could be like a more purple color, Shift K. And then maybe what I'll do is actually make this lens on the inside have a unique material, so we can give that like a glass type of material inside of Substance Painter. So we could just go to Vertex Paint and maybe give this one like a different shade of purple here. And you're just going to kind of see what we have going on. So in Substance Painter, we're going to be able to choose based off of the color. This is an incredibly powerful technique. I use it all the time. I highly recommend you do as well. And you can also, I probably forgot to mention this, if in the case you want to use the same color again, you can always add to a palette. So there's an option in here, I forget where you have to go if I'm honest. There's an option to add to a palette basically. Okay, I found it. You have to go to the workspace panel right here, and what you can actually do is go to this color palette and make a new one. So if you wanted to like save, say, this pinkish material, you would just click on the plus button, and it's actually saved in the case you want to go back and reuse those colors. It's very useful. I probably should have done it beforehand because I kind of wanted to reuse that purple for these screws down here. Not really a big deal though. It's totally fine. So we're just going to keep going through here. Maybe we'll go over to this thing, and we're just going to press the L key for this one. I want this to have a unique material like a polymer, this one, and also this one right here. So I'm just going to go back to Vertex Paint, just give this another random color. And then I'm just going to go back into edit mode, and I think I'll just invert that selection, so that'll be like a metal color, or metal material, Shift K. Looks pretty good. And I think we got everything in there. Looks good. Cool. And just go back into global view, and I think the last one we're missing is this back part, so easy enough. So we're just going to go into vertex mode here. Press the L key for that, for the trigger, for this, maybe for these pieces as well. And this one's just going to be, you know, another color, like a yellow. Tick this button on and press Shift K. And I think maybe you can invert the selection in Vertex Paint. I'm not sure. Let's try it. Choose a different color and Shift K. I guess you can. I learned something new today. I wasn't sure if you could invert it in Vertex Paint, but apparently you can. So now I'll just press / on the numpad, and basically everything here, I don't know if we can select them all at once. I don't really use Vertex Paint that much, but yeah, these should all have their own unique material IDs here, which is perfect. You can also preview that by going up here and choosing Vertex, and then you can actually preview everything and see how it looks. So we have quite a few colors here. Honestly, if we used a color palette, we probably could have just reused a lot of these colors, but it's really not that big of a deal. This looks pretty good. And actually, one thing I noticed right here, I want this little cylinder inside to have a different color. So let me just quickly change to something different. There we go. And that's about it. So that's really easy. So now all we really have to do is just export this again. So I can just select everything, and then we're just going to export over our old low poly gun file. And that's it. So when we start texturing this, I'm going to show you how you can use the ID map inside of Substance Painter. Super easy to do, and I think you'll enjoy the workflow. In this video, I'm going to show you how to load everything into Substance Painter, including your low poly, your marmoset maps that you just baked, and kind of get everything set up. And then in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can actually bake inside of Substance Painter without having to use marmoset. Like I said, that one's I wouldn't recommend. Marmoset's just a better baker, but I'm going to show you both ways. So this video, I'm just going to show you how to load in the maps we already baked in marmoset. So very easy. In Substance Painter, we go to File, New. We simply load in the low poly, just like we did in marmoset. Now this time, we want to import those baked maps that we baked in marmoset. So we're just going to navigate to those. In this case, AO, curvature, and normal. We're going to click on OK. And just give it a second to load in. Now similar commands to marmoset, Alt and left mouse button, you can kind of move around like this. Middle mouse, you can kind of pan. Right mouse, you can kind of zoom in and out. You'll get used to it. So the first thing I want to do is load in all three of those maps. So we're going to go to texture set settings right here. Scroll down to normal map. Select the normal. Select the ambient occlusion and select the curvature. Now it's not going to update, so you have to kind of zoom in and out until it does update. And there we go. Everything is loaded in. That is all you have to do. And yeah, really easy. The curvature map is nice because, let me quickly show you how that works. If you ever use a material that has like a edge wear or something like this, the curvature map's going to kind of pick that up. So when I load that in, notice how it kind of detects, this is an awful material, but notice how it kind of detects the edges and kind of adds edge wear to that. So that's a pretty cool way to use the curvature map. That's the main reason we would need it. The main ones here are normal and ambient occlusion, and curvature is probably the third most important one. Now there are some other maps that we are going to use. One is going to be ID map. I don't do this inside of Substance Painter. I do this separately in Blender, and that'll be in a separate video. But I also want to bake out the position map because this can be very useful. What a position map is it basically defines the bottom and the top of the object. So say you had like a, I don't know, like a generator or something. The bottom of the generator is going to be dirtier and the top's not going to be as dirty. So you can kind of use position maps to define where the bottom is versus the top and kind of add, you know, dirt and things like that using a position map. So I actually want to bake that in here. I don't know if we'll use it, but we can bake it anyways. So I'm going to go to Bake Mesh Maps, and I'm going to turn off the normal, ambient occlusion, and curvature because we already loaded those in. ID, I said we're going to do separately in Blender. World space normal and thickness, I'm not going to use either. Position map is what I want here. So basically just change this to 4K, click on Bake Selected Textures, and now we're going to have a position map right here, which is cool. So that's it. It's really easy to load into Substance. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can actually bake everything inside of Substance for those of you that are not using marmoset to bake. Alright, so now that we have our ID map exported, and when I say ID map exported, I mean the actual model exported. The ID map carries along with it. We're just going to reload everything back into Substance. So let me just navigate to that low poly. We're going to import those baked maps from marmoset. Just the same stuff we've been doing here, nothing different. And then we'll click on OK. And now all I want to do is I want to just load in those textures here. So we're going to do our normal, curvature, and ambient occlusion. Now in Substance Painter, what you need to do, the ID map won't show up by default. What you need to do is actually bake it. But the data for the ID map is in the FBX file, so it's really easy. Let's just turn everything off and bake the ID map. Change this to 4K. Now click on this and make sure you're using vertex color. You can also make ID maps with materials, but making 10 different materials or 20 or whatever didn't make much sense to me. That's why I prefer using vertex color. So change it to a vertex color and then click on Bake Selected Textures and just give it a second. And you're going to see we have our ID map. There it is. So now if I ever want to, let's do a quick example here. So now let's say I had maybe like the steel, right? So I had like a steel, and then I had like a, let's do something realistic, like a rubber. I know there won't really be a rubber on here, but just for demonstration, then you had like this type of thing. What you could do is you could add a mask with color selection. What this will do is add a black mask, but when we pick the color, it'll overlay the white to reveal that type of rubber material. So I can just kind of keep picking all these different colors, and you're going to see it updates just fine. So that's why I like using ID maps. They're not essential. You can bypass them with different, ways like I showed you before with that little volume tool, but I just prefer using ID maps. They're way easier to work with. Now there's a few things I want to point out here, and this is going to lead us into a separate set of videos. I set this up in such a way because to me, this is the best way to make it make sense. So let's say I start going in here and I just start adding in some different materials. I'm thinking maybe we could use, let me find a good material here. Let's do a steel, rust, and wear. I think that was in here. So if you just go to the basic materials panel, I found that a pretty good material for this is this one. So we're just going to drag that on. Looks pretty good. Maybe we could slightly adjust some of the parameters here. So maybe drop the dirt a bit, and maybe make the metallic a little bit brighter. And also you could adjust the roughness a little bit if you want. So now it's kind of more metallic, looks good. And then I want the other pieces to have like a more polymer type of material. I found another good material that kind of imitates that because there's not like a default polymer inside of SubstancePainter. And you can research like all sorts of different things for weapons, see what types of materials they're using. It just really depends on the weapon from the research I've done. Like the Glock, for example, if you've seen those, like the handle's like a more polymer type of material from my research. So there's no polymer in here, but what I found is that you can just imitate it. There's a pretty good material I found called plastic armor. So it's like a more metallic type of plastic, if that makes sense. So I'm going to drag this on, and we're going to have like a pretty cool type of effect here. See that? So the first thing I want to do is make this a little bit darker. So we can just click the folder and go to the base color here. You can just kind of drag these colors down a bit like that. These scratches I'm going to turn off completely, I think. Or if anything, I could just click on this black mask right here, and I could just go to the metal edge wear generator and just kind of drop the wear level a bit and kind of get that type of effect. Now what I could do is combine this with our ID maps to select the areas I want this to be on. So I'd basically just, right click, add mask with color selection, then I could kind of pick, this one maybe, and then these ones. And this is the power of the ID maps. It makes everything so much quicker. That's why I love it. Could also do these little pieces right here. I think that's it. Are we missing anything? I don't think so. Now I do want to get rid of these scratches completely, so let me go in here and just kind of adjust this. So if you go open this folder right here, there's like a scratches subfolder. We could go in here and maybe go over to this metal edge wear and just drop this even further. Honestly, I'm just going to drop it all the way. Or I could kind of play with the contrast, see what works. I'm just going to drop that completely, I think. Now check this out. This is a base color slot right down here, which we can, use to kind of adjust the color. There's actually a parameter in here called noise. And this is going to kind of give us a very small amount of surface imperfections and like bumps. We kind of have it here, but it's not really elevated off the mesh. So what I could do is kind of increase the intensity a little bit. And that's not working. Interesting. I might need to also adjust the level instead. Okay, it's not intensity in this case. It's actually, well, it kind of is. The intensity kind of makes it a bit more sharpened in a way. You probably can't see much of a difference, but the level here is actually what I care about. So I'm going to kind of increase the level. And notice this is going to kind of bring out a really nice type of bumpy effect. It looks a bit more realistic. So it's better than like a plain material. We kind of have that nice bumpy effect on the mesh, and that's exactly what I want. You don't want to make it too high because then it's just going to look bad. Or if you do choose to do that, you could simply increase the roughness and just kind of play with it that way. But that's basically all I wanted to do there. This material right here should be very simple, nothing crazy. Because if you look at references of weapons, I mean, the worst you're going to see is like a little bit of wear and tear here and there. But this is kind of how it looks, right? Alright, I'm going to drop this folder now because I'm basically done with that. I want to adjust this a bit more. This steel rust and wear, I think it should be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to click on it and go to this metal color slot and just kind of drop this. Not too far. It should be a little bit brighter than the, the grip and stuff, but maybe like right around here. It looks really nice. And we could have a little bit of dirt on there, but if you want like more of a sci-fi look, it might be a good idea just to kind of get rid of it completely. Surface imperfections, which one is this? Rust? Yeah, I'm going to drop the rust and maybe the dirt could come out a little bit. Not too much dirt, but just a little bit. And these surface imperfections have to go. I don't like that. So we can just kind of play with the dirt, see how that looks, but sci-fi doesn't generally have too many dirty things, so don't go overboard on it. Alright, I think I'm going to make the metal color just a bit darker. That looks good. And you can also kind of play with the metal roughness here. You don't want to make it too rough. If anything, it should be more on the reflective side, so maybe right around here. And as you can see, this looks pretty good. And this is like the main idea here. I'm not trying to go overboard on these textures. I'm not trying to make like a complex Substance tutorial because we don't need it. Most of the time, like people make a lot of advanced Substance tutorials, which is good, but 99% of the time you don't need all of these advanced tools to get a good result. This is already a good result. So just going to kind of pan around. You can also shift and right mouse button and kind of rotate the lighting just to kind of see how it looks. And this is really clean. You could also go up here and change the HDRI to like a studio, so maybe something like that, and then just kind of play with the lighting and just kind of see if you like any of these different options here. This one's pretty cool actually, that looks really nice. And that's really about it, so I'm going to let you play with this. I mean, Substance Painter is pretty straightforward. If you need to learn how to use masks and layers and things like that, that's a whole nother topic. You can just watch tutorials on YouTube for how masking works. I've pretty much already given you the idea that black conceals and white reveals. So I don't think there's too much left to do. I want to keep this as clean as possible, and this is going to give us a very decent result and should be enough, I think. I want to show you how to add in decals and things like that inside of Substance Painter. Now the difference between, say, Decal Machine inside of Blender and just adding decals in Substance Painter is that Decal Machine and Blender, they're set up using node groups which do not transfer outside of the Blender software. So you can use Decal Machine and Blender to detail this a bit more if you want, but usually you'd only be doing that if you're just looking for a cool portfolio render. If you actually want to take, decals and bring them into a game engine, I'd recommend doing all of that in here. If you have Decal Machine, you could always import the normal maps associated with those decals into Substance Painter, but Substance Painter already has a nice collection of normal stamps that we can work with. So let's go ahead and add in I already added one here. Let's add in a brush layer. Click on this. And what this is going to do is basically add in just a simple paint layer here. And if I were to just start painting, you're going to see we just kind of get like, this effect. And right here we have an alpha, and this is basically the shape. You can leave this on default. You could always change the different shapes if you wanted to though, but the default's fine for this case. Now what I want to do is I want to get some depth information. So I'm going to go and add in a normal stamp. So we can just go here to our textures, type in normal, and that will filter out all of these normal maps. Like I said, you can import your own if you want, but most of these are fine for what you need. I'm just going to find a very basic circle one. So I'm going to click and drag this over here into normal. And now if I start painting this, we're going to have a little bit of height information. Now you can hold control and right mouse button and move left or right to kind of make it smaller. But you're going to see now that I'm painting, we kind of have this illusion of depth going on. Now we don't need this color information. We don't need that white color, right? All we need is the normal information so we can have the depth without the color. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off everything here except for normal. And now we're going to kind of have like that nice indentation. If you turn normal off, it just won't do anything. So, make sure that's turned on. And we can get some pretty cool effects here. So check this out. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around to different areas where I think it would look good and just kind of start stamping in some little decals. So maybe before we do that, actually, let's go ahead and turn on symmetry. Click on that, and you can also change the symmetry axis if that's what you want. The X is fine. So now whenever I make like a stamp, for example, it will mirror over so we can save time. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go around here and just start adding in like little stamps to this, right? Nothing complicated. I'm just going to keep going around, maybe add one here. And this is just going to give a little bit of additional, levels of visuals. So we could do one here, and then one here, maybe one here in this corner. These should not be pulling a lot of attention. These should just be very supple additions. So, we should always be able to kind of move and change these around. If we want to, you can just kind of erase it. If you ever want to erase something, you would just go in here and you can erase it using that eraser tool. So should be very supple, like I said, nothing that should be like locked in or anything. This should always be able to just be adjusted. So all I'm going to do is just keep going around here. We could add in maybe a few right here. Let's do the next one here, I think. That looks good. And you can always switch the normal stamp. So maybe I could click and drag in like one of these, right? You can always make it bigger. So control right mouse button to make it bigger. Maybe we could put some of these like right here. So make that a bit smaller. Click, click, and then let's try to make these even though. As even as possible. That looks pretty good. Now we can have like an indentation there. Okay, let's see what else we could add. Maybe we could pan over here to this thing and maybe you can always rotate it. So what you would do is you would just scroll up and under angle, you could just type in or just drag the slider, do like a 90-degree angle. I'm thinking we could put one like on the inside here. Just a very, very small, like, I don't know, like a notch there. Doesn't really make much of a difference, I guess, but it's kind of cool. Next, what we could do, this is a pretty cool idea. We could make like a little grip under here almost. So let's see, let's find a decent one. Vent caps, I don't know if that'll look cool or not. Let's try. I know it's not a vent, but it might work. So click and drag that in. And let's just kind of see. Let me turn off the mirror for this one because we're going to be right in the middle. Interesting. Let me change the rotation here back to 0. And that's not going to work. Let's just do individual stamps. I think that'll be better. So let's do maybe this again. And we could just kind of go in here and this is interesting. Notice we're getting some mirrored behavior on here, even though the symmetry is turned off. What this tells me is that we actually had mirrored UVs on the stock. So if we go back here in Blender, my guess is that if I go to the UV editor, if I select one face here and select the opposing face on the side, my guess is they are overlapped, which they are. Not really a big deal. I don't remember doing that. So if that was a big deal, you might just want to re-unwrap it. Honestly, for this, it's not a big issue because I'm not going to be doing too much to this. I did want to kind of get some grips there on the bottom, but I'm not really getting the exact effect that I want, am I? So if you wanted to, you could always go back in and just re-unwrap it, but I don't think it's really that big of a deal. We're not really putting anything on this one, so a few notches up here could be cool. And in this case, it's actually totally fine if it mirrors over because I'm going to turn the symmetry back on anyways. So let's just make like a very small little notch there and notch there. That's kind of cool. Next, we could go to the top here and let's just change to a different, let's do this one. We could go up here and just make like a small little click there. Small little click here. Notice the resolution does get a bit lower at the top. I'm going to show you in separate videos how you can actually increase your resolution using multiple texture sets. Very, very important technique. I definitely needed to include it in here, but we're not going to discuss that yet. So that'll be in separate videos for those of you that want to know how to actually increase resolution without having to go to like, above the 4K texture or whatever. That would be done using multiple texture sets, which we're going to go over in a separate video. Maybe we could drop another thing right there. Can barely even see a difference. So yeah, this is where the multiple resolution or higher resolution trick I'm going to show you. Not really a trick, but that's where it'll kind of come in handy for making a bit higher quality areas. So if I turn on and off this layer, you should be able to see just a very slight increase in the overall detail. It's not meant to be eye-poking. It's meant to just kind of add a little bit of additional effect to it. Now I want to show you how to add in info decals, so like text and things like that. Go here to the paint bucket tool, and we're just going to have all these parameters again. In this case, all I need is the color information because it's just going to be text. So we can turn everything off, and then all we have to do is go over to our, let's see. Well, first things, I don't want the entire white color to override the entire weapon, so what I'm going to do is add a black mask, which is going to conceal that layer there. Can just get rid of everything, right? So remember, to reveal that back, we would add in white, and this grayscale is currently set to white, so if I paint in, it will reveal it. Now check this out. Our alpha shape is currently a circle, but if I change this to like an arrow, for example, and click, we have an arrow. It reveals it. We're not going to paint it, we're just going to click. So in this case, what we can do is kind of scroll down and find some text. You could type in text, and there's quite a few interesting ones here. You could also import your own if you wanted to, and you can also, there's one where you can type in your own, I think. I don't think I can access it there. I think you have to scroll through to find it manually. But this area where it says like substance, what you can do is select that and then type in your own text. So maybe what I could do here is type in, I don't know, Kulzer, like a sci-fi name, right? And control left mouse button, move up and down to kind of rotate it. You can kind of paint in like a symbol there. It's a bit too bright, so you might want to reduce the base color a little bit, so it's not very eye-poking. This should just be a very slight type of like branding on it almost, which is pretty cool. And then what we could do is we could duplicate this layer. So right click and duplicate, and just make this one like a whiter color. But what we need to do, when we duplicate it, it also duplicates any areas we had before. So in this case, we would just need to clear, right click to clear that mask. So that one's cleared. So this one's empty, so now we could go back in and maybe, let's just do like some additional random stuff here just to make it look interesting. And then just make the color a little bit darker. Kind of like that. And I would not recommend having symmetry on for this, because then it would actually mirror the text. It would be inverted. So I think that's fine. And I zoom out, and the first thing I kind of look at is this text. It's a bit too eye-pulling. So let's make this even lower so we're not really seeing it. And then maybe this one could be even lower, like a black color almost. You could also turn on the metallic information if you wanted to, and just kind of like make it more metallic. There's so many different options here you can kind of play with, so just kind of see what you like. Maybe we could add in another, let's go back to this layer, like another stamp up here. So for this one, let me click on that black mask, and let's use a different alpha. Let's use like some sort of interesting shape that I think could fit well here. You can just scroll through them. You can also access those up here under the alphas section if that's easier for you. So you can kind of scroll through and see a little bit more. Maybe we could do like, I don't know, one of these shapes, click and drag it in. Let me reset the rotation to 0. Do like a little stamp right there. That's kind of cool. You don't want to go overboard with this. You just want to make it very minor, right? So maybe up here, we could do like a different text. Let me go back into this and just scroll down, find that text again. I always end up losing it. It's in here somewhere. Here it is. And this one could be like a, I don't know, Azura. And then just kind of, you know, paste that in. I don't like that spot. Maybe down here. Or maybe even we could use a different font. Let's see what else is in here. There's a few sci-fi fonts, which is kind of cool. You just have to search through these and see what you like. I don't think you can see it on my screen, but if you just hover over these, it'll bring up a preview. I guess I could just go over here instead, then you can actually see. That one's kind of cool. We also have, I want like a hard surface type of font almost. So I think that's what we used before. Let's just use it again. We'll type in Azura or something. A little bit smaller. That's reasonable. And that's how you do it. So I'm not gonna, you know, waste your time going through every little thing and on repeat. There's not really anything else I want to add to this anyways. So if you want to add additional normal stamps or alphas, go ahead and do that now, whether you're using this model or whether you're using your own model. So hope that helped. Hope it gave you some clarity, and we're gonna end the video here. Alright, so if you're not using Marmoset to bake your maps, I'm going to show you how to bake everything in Substance. So basically the same process as before. We go to File, New, we load in our low poly. I'm going to be using 4K, and depending on your software, DirectX or OpenGL, it doesn't really matter what you choose. You can always invert the Y channel of the normal map, so not a big deal. And then you just click on OK. But remember, we're not importing any baked maps here because we're going to be baking them inside of Substance in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Now what we have to do is go down to Texture Set Settings again, Bake Mesh Maps. Now we want to make sure we load in our high definition mesh here. So we're just going to load in that high poly. And this time I want to bake the normal. I don't want to bake world space or ID, but I do want to bake ambient occlusion, curvature, and position. I don't need thickness. I'm going to go down to 4K. And that's basically all we have to do. So we're going to click on Bake Selected Textures and just kind of wait. Give it, you know, a few seconds, whatever it takes for you. And then click on OK, and there we go. We're going to have all the maps baked in. And that's how you bake inside of Substance. Now from afar it looks okay, but this is what I'm saying about Substance is the results are rarely as good. Look at all these baking issues here. It's just a mess, and it does not look anywhere near as good as Marmoset's bakes. And not to mention, you can't, you know, use any sort of cage or skew painting in SubstancePainter. Now let me show you, if you were using SubstancePainter, how you would get rid of these random baking artifacts like we have here. And it's not very easy. I'll show you anyways, just in case you're curious. What you would do is you would basically go back to your blend file and just kind of link up like which areas has an issue. So like, you know, right around here, for example, what we can do is we can just tab in here and just press the L key and just kind of see, you know, which areas this is corresponding to on our UV map, just to kind of get an idea of where it's going to be. So it looks like the baking issue is actually here, right? So if we were to go into our normal map, you'd see a baking issue like roughly right around this selection, because once again, that's the issue. So what you would have to do is you would have to save this normal map right here. And to navigate to that, I think you go to Textures, and we're just going to type in normal. And then you should have that normal map right in here. And what you can do is right click and just export the resource. So we can do that and just call it normal. Like that. And then what you would do is you would go into, oh, I guess I have to put it in a folder. There we go, that's fine. And then what you'd have to do is go into like Photoshop or something and paint it out. So yeah, what you'd have to do is just once again find that portion, which is like right here. It's kind of, you know, hard to even find and link up, if I'm honest. You have to kind of go through here and just figure out like where those baking issues are. I'm already having trouble with it. You could also just save this right here as like a PNG or something, then overlay it in Photoshop so you know immediately. Actually, I think it's just this one right here. I don't know why I was having so much trouble finding that. It's this one right here. So what you'd have to do is just you can add in a new layer. You could press the B key for brush, and then you could alt click to sample that color, and then you'd basically just come in here and paint it out. Let me go up here and increase the flow, and you would let me increase the hardness as well. So alt and then right mouse button to increase the hardness. And you just get in here and paint it. And I'm struggling because my mic's right in front of me. So yeah, it's basically what you would do in here. You just kind of paint that out. And it's always going to be hard to get it perfectly accurate. So, you know, I'm just kind of doing it sloppy here. And that's like the rough idea. And you can already begin to see how having to go to every single piece with a baking issue and doing that process is just going to take you way more time than it is possibly worth dealing with. So this is why I recommend Marmoset. You can adjust the cage, you can adjust, you know, the skew, the offset, you can adjust pretty much everything. And that is why we're going to be using those maps instead. But honestly, if you want to bake curvature and your ambient occlusion inside of Substance Painter, that's cool. The main one I'm worried about baking is the actual normal map inside of Substance, because that's just generally not going to give you as good of results. So overall, like I said, just use Marmoset maps, they're better. Alright, so welcome back to Substance Painter. This is going to be a pretty simple, basic overview of how it works. Substance Painter is not hard to learn if you're familiar with Photoshop and masking and things like that. If you're brand new to it might take a little bit of time to get your head around, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. So just to recap, you load in your new file by just selecting your low poly. I'm going to be doing 4K for my document resolution, and I'm going to import those baked maps from Marmoset. So in this case, we had our AO, curvature, and normal, and this is the... Let me delete that. So yeah, just these three. We'll click on open and then click on OK. And then all we have to do is just to load those in under the texture set settings. We'll go here, load in the normal map, the curvature map, and the ambient occlusion map. And I'm going to be baking the position map as well. So I'm just going to turn all these off and just bake position and set that to 4K. And that's really all we have to do to get started. So to add materials, you'll always go here to the layers panel, and this works just like layers in Photoshop if you're familiar with that. Very good for organizing. So for example, I could go to Smart Materials, which is basically basic materials with additional effects built onto it. So maybe what I could do is try to find like a cool steel material and just drag and drop that on. That one looks awful if I'm honest. There's this weird red one. And honestly, what I'm going to do, I found that curvature bakes inside of Substance are a bit more accurate. So I'm going to delete this one out and simply rebake the curvature here in Substance. I'm just going to turn everything off and just bake the curvature again at 4K. And we're just going to get a little bit of a better result, at least in my experience. Cool. So now if I drag this back on, it should be a little bit more accurate. At least I think it is. Either way. So it's easy, you can just kind of go through here, you can hover over these materials to kind of see what they look like and then drag them on to see how those look. You can see this one's pretty cool. Now I also want to show you how you can assign different materials to different areas, and this is where we can also use an ID map. So I'm going to show you in the next video how to get your very own ID map as well. So for example, let's say I wanted, you know, the scope to have certain properties, certain materials, and I wanted other areas to have different materials. For example, if I pull over Ryu's render right here, this is one of his renders just before we recorded the course, so I thought it would be pretty cool to demonstrate. Notice that some of these areas have, you know, more metallic stuff, and other areas have more like polymer types of areas, right? So you could kind of do the same thing here inside of Substance Painter, because you're not going to want to have the same material everywhere, right? So let's say I wanted like, I wanted this to be the base material. Actually, not this one, maybe that one. We could even just use like a default material. I just want to find like a very basic material for the weapon here. Okay, let's just use something like this. I'm probably not going to use this, but just for demonstration. Now let's say I wanted a different material on the different areas. What I could do, for example, is I could find, let's search for like a plastic and search for like an armored type of plastic. kind of like that. Now if I drag and drop this on, what it does is it adds this above the other layer, which means it overrides that one. Now I don't really want that to happen. Basically what I want to happen is I want this to only override on the areas I have selected. So what we can do, if you're not familiar with masking, is you can right click to add a black mask. Now what this does is it just adds a just pure black material, which is basically saying conceal that effect, conceal that material. And the way we can reveal it back is by painting in white. So that's the general idea of how masks work. So what I could do is I could go, there's a few different ways I could do it. I could go up here to the brush, and if I scroll down, there should be an option for grayscale, which is currently set to white. So if I start kind of painting this in, notice that it reveals that because we're painting on white there. Now there's a quicker way to do this. You can select by volumes instead. So you can do is go to this button right here, and you can kind of fill it in. Make sure this is set to white once again, because white is going to reveal it. So you could select like the faces here, but that would take way too long. So what I like to do is go here to the volume button, and we click on that, and that'll basically fill in that entire volume. So you could click here, here, maybe like up here, right? Maybe on these pieces as well. Maybe on that piece and that piece. And maybe on the trigger here. And that's basically the general idea. See what that does is it reveals the that material in the areas that we just selected by basically adding white over the black mask. That's how it works. I'm not gonna cover crazy masking in this course. If you want to learn how masking works, it's very simple. Just look up on YouTube, how masking works for Photoshop or Substance or something like that. But that's the general idea. Black conceals, white reveals. Easy enough. Now, we're not going to get into the texturing in this video. Just kind of wanted to show you the basics here. So in the next video, what I want to do is show you another way to do this using an ID map. So we're just going to hop back into Blender real quick.